In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. I hope that everybody is doing the best that they possibly can, given the crazy state of the world right now, and I hope that my videos can, entertain you as best as possible, whilst trying to survive the madness. Today I'm going to be reviewing a movie called The Snake People from 1971. This movie is also known as Isle of the Snake People, and it stars Boris Karloff. Basically, the premise of this movie is that there are these armed forces, I think they're supposed to be French, I can't tell. They get sent to this area that I assume is in Haiti because there's voodoo stuff going on, and their goal is to wipe out the murderous voodoo cult. There's also a woman with them for some reason who's part of the anti-salooners group and trying to do the whole prohibition thing and get rid of alcohol. Then they meet Boris Karloff, who's this scientist living there in Haiti and blending his science and trying to make progress with ideas taken from voodoo. Things just kind of get crazy from there, and it's a mess. I don't really understand or care about the plot of this movie. Acting-wise, you've got Karloff playing this professor who's this kind old gentleman with something of a dark side, which Karloff can do better than almost any other actor. He's Boris Karloff. I don't know what else you want from him. He's just doing his very best acting job as Boris Karloff does, and he is definitely the high point of this movie. We've also got a character who we meet early on, who is this member of this voodoo cult. I'll get into my problem with the whole voodoo thing in a minute, but he's a member of the voodoo cult. He's this voodoo practicer who has this hat and sunglasses and this big staff that he carries that I thought was really cool, and he has this amazing evil laugh that made me extremely happy, and he's just hamming it up as best as possible, and it's really fun. But I don't know if this is the correct terminology, so correct me if I'm wrong, but he is a midget. They literally just credit his character as midget in the movie, which I hate. They clearly just cast him in that role for shock value. His character's just kind of this evil henchman thing, and I didn't like that, but he's doing the best he possibly can and making this character really fun and over the top and hammy, which was fun, and I enjoyed it, but at the same time, it just felt very wrong to me. Then you've got the woman who is part of the anti-saloon league, and she's this feminist character. She's very sort of spunky and headstrong and smart. I liked that aspect of her, but they just kind of play it as this stereotype of that. There's not really any kind of depth to her character. They just kind of play her as way too uptight. I'll get into my problems with the dialogue, which is all of it, but her performance was probably hampered by how bad the dialogue was, but it just wasn't good. It just felt kind of flat. And I think you could do good things with this kind of character, but there's just no depth to really any of the characters. You've got the soldiers who I think are supposed to be French. I hated every single one of them because they were terrible. I'm presuming they are not actually French, but they've got these accents that just reminded me of the Frenchmen from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. If they were actually French, I'm sorry. Most of the acting in this movie is just really, really bad, which is probably mostly due to the script, but at the same time, Karloff does a great job with the terrible script that he is given, so I'm just gonna say it's bad acting. The other character, who doesn't really have much character besides being sort of the spooky, seductive character, is the character who we presume is Karloff's wife, but who we also see as sort of the witchy character floating around in a bunch of other scenes. She has this snake that's always with her, and she's got this white streak through her hair and really dark eyeshadow and eyeliner, and she's just sort of the spooky, seductive character. I just enjoyed the style and presence of that character, but no depth there. There are points in the movie where she's clearly just supposed to be eye candy, which I didn't like, but I liked the style of that character. The movie opens with cheesy opening narration trying to inject some kind of science or history or something based in fact into your ridiculously bad horror movie. It's giving us this very stereotypical depiction of voodoo in this really bad light. I don't really know anything about voodoo and Haitian religions and cultures and practices of that nature, but I am fairly confident that this movie is just turning it into this generic evil spooky thing. And I like sort of generic evil spooky cults in movies, but when you take something like this and just make it into this random force of evil in your movie, there's probably some racism there, which I did not much care for. It's kind of the same problem I had with White Zombie. Actually, most of my problems with White Zombie go for this movie as well, but White Zombie actually has a good story too. Another character later, when one of them inevitably is like, what is voodoo? It's just like, oh, it's just native superstition, when it's a freaking religion and tradition, and I don't like this. If I keep that in mind, I can have fun with the sort of cheesy movie version of voodoo that is in this movie. The dialogue in this movie is so bad. It's painful. It just feels really, really, really forced and never like something an actual person would say, except when Karloff does it. Maybe that's just my personal bias, but he makes it sound natural. There's sort of an opening exposition scene between the captain of these soldiers and the anti-saloner woman, sort of talking back and forth, and he's just like,
this is a man's world.
and she's like,
women are much more capable than you think.
and just like, yay, girl power, but wow, this dialogue is the most generic thing I've ever heard in my life, and I hate it. There's a romance scene later on where the genericness of the dialogue killed me, but I'll get to that. There's also a subplot with this one guy who's also come to Haiti with Karloff's character and has gotten into the voodoo thing. He has taken what Karloff is doing, because what Karloff is trying to do is actually really cool within the context of the movie, which is he's taking sort of the idea of the zombie drug that is used in the voodoo tradition to sort of put people into a state of what seems to be living death, and trying to use it as something for surgical practices and try to make it so it doesn't ruin people's ability to think properly. His assistant, who he's working with, just decides to do the whole zombie thing and finds a woman and makes her a zombie and just kind of makes her his slave, and it's awful and horrible, but it's an interesting sort of story point, but that's only just relatively good compared to the rest of the movie. This movie is bad. If that isn't abundantly clear by this point, this movie is bad. There's a lot of random scenes that don't need to be there, and I don't understand why they're there at all. It's just kind of supposed to be creepy, I guess, but it's dumb. There's a romance scene later on between one of the soldiers that has come along, who's clearly supposed to be the young sort of hero love interest, and the woman who I've mentioned before from the Anti-Salooners League, who's sort of the headstrong feminist type character. She's just reading out of Professor Karloff's book of science stuff, and he just starts spouting these really cheesy, forced-sounding, poetic love lines, and I can't even quote them back to you. I don't remember any of them, but they're really dumb. And she's just like, could you perhaps be making advances on me? And it's so forced and so stupid, but I absolutely love it because of that. It's the most staged fake romance in a movie I've ever seen, and because of that, I enjoyed it more than I would like your average romance subplot in a Universal monster movie, because it stood out because of how dumb it was. It was actually interesting for that reason. So this movie does have its so bad it's good aspects, and some good aspects besides just Karloff too, which I'll get to. The music is nothing super special. It's kind of your typical spooky horror music from the 30s to the 60s. on. This is 1971, but just coming out of the 60s, so it's a lot of just that typical symphonic spooky horror music with sort of what's supposed to be a tribal percussive element. But they don't really blend the two very well. They're just kind of playing big, sinister piano chords that are completely out of sync with all the tribal drumming, and some of it sounded kind of cool, but most of it was just okay. The movie's strongest point is probably its visuals, besides Karloff's acting. The opening credits to the movie have this really interesting sort of stop-motion type thing going on with, like, cutouts of the names of people and photos and things tearing and moving around. It's a really cool, stylized opening credits sequence, but they bring some of the title cards from that back into the movie just to say things at random moments. Like, we know that sort of the big leader of the cult, who we don't know who it's actually supposed to be, is named Damballa. So there's just a totally random title card that says Damballa in the middle of the movie, which is weird. But I liked the opening credits. The movie's visuals are actually super stylish. Everything looks really fake. Nothing looks real about this movie, but it's stylized in this sort of B-movie artificial way that was enjoyable. The sets of the area where the voodoo rituals are practiced, sort of in the woods with everything covered in cobwebs, and there's fog and skeletons everywhere in this big fire. It's got this sort of cheesy horror atmosphere to it that's very over the top. I really, really liked that. It's clear that they're probably not even shooting outside in that instance. It's probably inside on some kind of soundstage, but I liked that sort of fake gothic atmosphere. I don't know how to put it, but that's what it felt like. It's very cheesy, but it felt almost like the way I love tacky Halloween decor, which I have all over my room. It's the same sort of aesthetic. That's why I like the look of this movie, and the camera angles that they use at points are actually really stylish. With a B-movie like this, you'd usually just get some really static, boring shots, but there's lots of strange camera angles and overhead shots and weird edits. It's actually got a lot of really cool visual style to it that I enjoyed. Special effects wise, we've got a little bit of sort of weird makeup when one character like gets burnt or disintegrated or something later, which looked really fake, but we barely see it, so I don't know. But we also have a scene that's super surreal and has a character that's disappearing and reappearing. The effect that they use for that is literally what's been used since the very beginning of film, which is film the person, move them out of the shot, film the blank thing, and it's just that classic hokey reappear disappear effect. It's super cheesy, but it kind of fits within the whole artificiality of the whole movie, so I enjoyed that. All in all, this movie is bad. The story is dumb, the script is dumb, all of the stuff that they're just trying to do here falls flat, but I enjoyed watching Karloff do his thing, and visually this movie is actually really, really enjoyable. So if you want to check this out, maybe you should give it a shot. It's fun for what it is. I mean, Boris Karloff's in it, and if you just want some cool visuals, check it out, but this is nothing that's required viewing by any stretch of the imagination, and some of the acting is just really painful. That is my spoiler-free review of The Snake People. Here are the few spoilers. The scene that I was talking about before with the reappear disappear effect is one where the girl who's the main love interest and is sort of the feminist character, you know who I'm talking about, she falls asleep and the sort of witchy character comes in and has like some kind of incense or magical fumes burning and is sort of consecrating her dreams to Damballa, and she falls asleep and has this really surreal dream sequence where she wakes up in a coffin and then looks down and opens another coffin and she sees herself who comes out of the coffin, and it's sort of this evil version of herself who starts appearing and disappearing around the room, and there's lots of really weird editing and it's just super stylized and cool. And then it ends with a rather literal depiction of self-love, and by that I mean she kisses herself, and it's very unexpected and weird, and I have no idea what to make of it, but that whole scene was completely unnecessary, but one of the highlights of the movie for me just because of how over the top and stylized and just weird it was. We have a scene of the guy who's taken this woman and made her into a zombie, and he's just being awful and sexist to her, and Karloff bursts in on him and basically is like, all the hard work we've been doing and you're just making more zombie slaves. I hate you, and just starts whacking him over the head with his cane. Karloff's a lot older at this point, so he's just seen as this kindly old man, so he just starts whacking him over the head with his cane, and I loved that. But then shortly after that, they basically disintegrate her, which she didn't deserve at all, so no. We eventually find out who Damballa is, and surprise, it's Karloff. Because of course it is. And he's got the hat and the big cane with the skull on the end of it and the dark glasses, and he's killed the character of Midget for these things for some reason, or maybe no reason. I have no clue why. There's gonna be this whole scene where they sacrifice main heroine to summon some even higher power, and the soldiers are coming in to try to expose the cult for murder, and Karloff gets shot and starts bleeding out on the ground. He's just like, please offer my blood to summon this higher spirit being. In the meantime, the awful, stupid military captain who I hated gets bitten by the snake that we've been seeing through the movie and falls into the fire, and then the fire freaking explodes. Our sort of two love interesty characters just run off as the side of this mountain that they're behind just blows up. There's just a big explosion for literally no reason at the end of this movie, and it feels like just this bad, weird, out of the blue take on the ending of Bride of Frankenstein, and it's so dumb, but also the best possible ending for a movie like this. That's The Snake People. It's a really stupid movie, and the plot is awful, but it's a really cool movie visually. It's got some dumb, fun, so bad it's good moments, and it's got Boris Karloff. So for that, it might be worth checking out, but this is nothing that's required viewing. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!